Hello, this is Pat Giroux. I'm here with Butlee. Do you want to say hi, Butlee?
Yeah, I do. Hi, everyone.
And today he'll be making a character for us in this game of Tavern Tales. If you're familiar with more traditional tabletop RPGs, this might be a bit different for you, but I hope it's a lot of fun to watch play out. Butler has made characters and played this game before, so he has an idea of what's coming, but character creation is somewhat random. So, Butler, why don't you go ahead and start us off? What you need to do is draw one combat card, one exploration card, and one interaction card.
Okay. The cool thing about this is that all the characters that you make, like making a new character, it's based on the sort of random traits that you draw. So you kind of build up your character as you go, and as a player, you're trying to you have to invest your own sort of fantasy into it. So you're trying to think of what your person is like as you go through it.
So here we have three traits. Your traits are the things that your character is capable of. And in this case, Buttley has drawn a beast trait from the theme beast, a dragon trait, and a warfare trait. Combat traits deal typically directly with combat. Exploration traits deal with going out in the world and the environment, and interaction traits typically deal with how you interact and compare to other creatures and characters and NPCs in the world. So we'll go into what they actually functionally do, but for now the important thing is that Buttley has drawn the beast theme, the dragon theme, and the warfare theme. And what this allows him to do now is pick 2 additional combat, 2 additional exploration, and 2 additional interaction traits from those 3 themes. And that is what goes into building his character. However, before we do that, there is one other thing Buttley needs to do, and that is draw 2 attributes to sort of it helps flesh out his character. So these are also randomized, and there are some very crazy things. They're sort of like a backstory or a personality trait to your character. In this case, Buttley is a treasure hunter and a glory seeker, which is a good mix. So, Buttley, for this campaign, for this character, just assume that for this campaign, you're trying to hunt down a famous, you've heard there's a legendary winged creature up in these mountains, and you and a band of your friends are going to go fight it and kill it. Because that is what glory seekers do. Glory seekers like to hunt down legendary creatures, big and famous creatures, and they like to take the trophies and they feel very proud about it. So that's his basis for his character, is these 5 traits.
And already you might have a bit of an idea in your mind sort of where we're going. Obviously having like a beast related trait that deals damage and having a glory seeker attribute, then you start thinking, well, he's obviously the type of guy who, yeah, he does seek the glory, he likes to go fighting. And then you have a lair and a treasure hunter. So you're going to be like a hoarder. You're going to collect things. You're going to chase after loot. And then the iron sharpens is obviously a bit of a utility, but yeah, it's another little interesting thing. The point is that you start in your head thinking of like combinations of things and how they work together and what sort of like character or person you're trying to create.
Yeah, so from here, Buttley can now look at any of the other things in the game. So over here is the combat traits, the other combat traits available to him. Up the top is the exploration traits, and below that is the interaction traits available to him, and he can look at any of those all at once. And also, down the bottom right of the game is a store, of which Buttley has 250 gold to spend on items and these 8 random treasures. There is a pool of treasures that you draw 8 from randomly, and then he is allowed to shop from them as well. And this all sort of happens roughly at the same time, because sometimes the treasures you want will influence what combat skills you want, and sometimes the interaction abilities might change how you want to play your character, and they all open up different things. So personally, I like to go over to treasures, just have a quick look at them. So we'll just have a quick look over them. Got a potion of immortality, which can make you quite tanky. Just some other things, a good crit item. We'll discuss crit in a bit. And then there's some good ranged weapons, and overall, just a pretty ordinary shop. Nothing like too amazing. Duplicate could be great if you can come up with something to put it on. But yeah, so that's an alright shop. Overall, shouldn't influence his character too much unless he really wants one of the weapons or duplicate. So, Buttley.
Shall I go and turn over these abilities and work on that side of things?
Well, just once quickly before we do that, can you please roll this dice?
Yeah. And Tabletop Simulator gives you a nice little hotkey to roll.
So Buttley has rolled 13. In this
Lucky
game,
13.
in this game, you start with 20 base stamina plus the d20 dice roll. So Buttley will start with 33 life. That is his base stamina. And if he, say, buys the Potion of Immortality, then he'll have 43. And there aren't many items that really boost that sort of stuff in the game. So it's a very big boost, albeit a bit fairly expensive. Buttley.
And knowing that's pretty important when you start picking your other traits as well,
Yeah.
because you need to have an idea of how much damage you can take and how often you can fight.
Yeah. So you're welcome to go ahead and start looking at all your different traits.
Do one at a time for effect.
Yeah, he's just going to flip them over. As you can see, each theme has a certain number of traits. You can get, up to like 8 to a single theme, to a single combat exploration interaction. And some of the traits are very powerful. Some of them have all different kinds of functions. So for the time being, I'll just let Butlee look through that, and I'll sort of explain some of the game mechanics. And I'm actually going to spawn really quickly a note card and write down some of these rules as I talk about them. So how the game functions is each turn you get 1 action and 1 movement. And then each combat you additionally get 2 defenses. An action in combat is represented by an A on an ability, or it's, for example, making a swing against an enemy or something to that effect. And these relate to the cards over here. Each of them have a letter on them indicating how and when you can use them. Of course, passive is always active. Then there is O, which is 1 use per combat. There's World, which is once per session, which are very powerful. I is Interrupt, once per turn at any time. And then there's Defense, which is at any time, but you can only use them twice. You can only use them as many defenses as you have. So that's the cheat sheet, roughly. And
I know where I'm going.
sure, I have a feeling I know where you're going as well, but I'll see what you do first. The other one thing I wanted to say before we get any further is how dice rolls work in this game is you take 3 dice, you roll them, and then you take the middlemost value die. So in this case, you got 11, 13, and 15. It would be 13 that is the middlemost value. Oops, sorry.
And so if I just cut in there, the other phrase you're going to hear is advantage and disadvantage, which explains if you get an advantage, you use the highest roll, and a disadvantage is the lowest roll.
Yeah, which is very important because, and we'll get to it in a minute, but when you get an advantage, you have a very high chance to crit, which often has additional effects. And I'll just demonstrate it again. In this case, there's a 7, a 17, and 13. In this case, it would be the 13 that is chosen, just to be absolutely clear, since that is the middlemost value. Anyway.
13 is the number of the moment. That's 3 13s in a row.
Apparently. So, what
I'm taking, you might want to zip down to combat traits now. I'm going to take Bulwark.
Okay.
Bulwark.
Yep.
Whatever that is, and Carnage. So you might want to pull them out because you have the viewer window.
All right.
And if I explain that, so first of all, what I want to mention is that just because I have a beast combat trait, it doesn't mean I have to take all beast combat traits. Basically, once you have your attributes and your first sort of random ones, that creates your whole character. So you can touch anything within the radius of those traits or those
themes.
Categories or themes. Yep, themes is the word. And so I've gone with Carnage, the dragon ability for extra crits. If you can already sort of see, I have Rending Claws, which does crit damage as well. So I have sort of a bit of a double up there. Plus, it's just a bit of extra damage because, excuse me, because, I'm supposed to be a fighter and things like that. Bulwark is a recovery sort of thing. So we already, as a quick example of what I might do, we looked at that potion of immortality, which I can double the effects of. I have other potions and other things I can build around being a bit stronger, because I only have 33 health. I can start to look at like other ways to tank up, and because I'm like a sort of a beastie dragon kind of person, just having general like a buffer sort of character is a bit stronger. So like I said, I picked the bulwark with the idea of the potion of immortality, and then I start thinking about other things I can do with that too. And that's about all you can aim for. You just start like trying to make like combinations and stuff like that.
Yeah. So
I'm going to go into exploration. Are you going to?
I'm going to have a look through your traits and sort of discuss them a little further.
All right, cool. Well, I'll have a quick read and leave you to it.
So in this case, Butlee has taken Rending Claws, which will give his melee attacks +1 damage, and Carnage, which gives his weapons +1 damage. Sometimes you can perform a melee attack without a weapon, and there are many abilities that don't use a weapon at all. So in these cases, they do two very different things. In addition, the critical effect on Carnage, maiming, is typically like you injure an arm or something to that effect. Now, in addition, crits might look a little strange here, because normally a critical hit is considered a 20. But when you roll the 3 dice, what ends up happening is a 20 is a very, very small thing to happen, because you're using that middle dice. And a 17 ends up being around a 5% chance for you to crit. So that's what we roughly use as a basis for critical. You still have about the same chance to crit as if you just rolled 1 dice, but you're going to get a lot more of a middle result normally. However, where the game really starts to change is with these advantages and disadvantages. When you get an advantage on a dice, you have something much closer to around a 50% chance to get a crit on a 17 or higher being your crit. Now, that being said, it does sound very powerful, but that being said, advantages are somewhat hard to come by, and in addition, crit effects are limited to things that specifically say that they do a crit effect. So if Butlee just attacks with a normal attack and hits for a 17, that's not going to do anything. But because he's got Rending Claws and Carnage, and both of those have a crit effect or an outcome, then they would apply their effects on that crit. And there are many items that you can access and other traits that tie into this crit mechanic. And in a way, when you start building to use crits, you start giving up certain other aspects like utility, you start giving up survivability. So as you see, Butlee's got 3 passives. So in combat, he's basically only going to be able to hit, and he's not going to be able to contribute much else but being a body that hits things. So it's a good character, very strong, lots of potential, but it's going to be very narrow and limited, and that's how the game balance sort of ties into it. And he might have a hard time accessing those crits.
So, all right, I'm ready to go with my next lot if everyone's keen. So I'm going to start with Cheetah's Swiftness.
Yep.
And take Greed is good as well. So come back over here and hover on them for a sec so I can explain. Cheetah's Swiftness, you move twice as fast this turn, so it's a sort of once per combat sort of ability.
Actually, interrupts have been changed to be once a turn at any time, and a lot of cards were rebalanced to fit that.
So you have a standard set of moves. Like we can say it's 5, but it'll depend on the map and the grid. But everyone has a standard set of moves. This just lets you get into fights again because it fits the character of being a bit of I wanted a beast trait because I'm supposed to have the beast element to the fighter that I'm working on here. And since I have such good upfront damage, I really want to be at the forefront, swinging blows and fighting and attacking.
Definitely.
What you don't want is to be picked off by people from range and stuff like that. So
yeah,
it's just a general good sort of trait. Greed is good. Well, again, you can start thinking of treasure hunter. So I've got, excuse me, I've got extra bits and pieces. I've got places to hide stuff in my lair. I'm starting to build a bit of have a motley assortment of items and just look after them and hold them and keep them, and then I can pick and choose at the start of every session what things to take with us, and you can sort of rebuild your character a little bit as you go. So
yeah,
I just thought that was a good thing that tied into a couple of the dragon things I already had. So
in the case of Greed is good, because you've chosen that trait, we actually go to the treasure store and we take 2 more treasures and we add it to your available treasures. So I'm just going to bring this down here, place it above so we know that these are the ones you got with that trait, and then we flip them over. And there you go, there's a nice big crit item, a very good melee crit item that ties almost perfectly in with Butlee's traits, being that he wants to focus on crits and he wants to be melee. So that's definitely something he can look at when looking at the store in the future.
Sorry, I'm just reading through some of the other items. Anyway, I'll go into interaction.
Sure.
Let's skim through them. I've got to remember my hotkeys. Tabletop Simulator is pretty cool, but yeah, you've got to remember. Wait a second. It flips some of them the other way. Sometimes it flips left, sometimes it flips right. Sorry.
That's all good.
Like, what is this? No. All right.
So, Lair. Lair is an interesting sort of ability, and you've played other games. It might not make a lot of sense to you, because why would there be a trait that specifically gives you a plot of land? But how Tavern Tales works a lot is players can contribute to the environment and the game with traits they take, with attributes they get, with all different things like that. There's a lot of interaction between the players and the world that goes beyond what, sometimes beyond the imagination. Sometimes they can do things more than what the GM would tell them or let them. In this case, if Butlee wishes, he can claim a plot of land with Lair. He can just say, I would like this plot of land, I'm going to claim it. And I might, as a GM, say, okay, if you want to take this piece of land, you have to fight for it or you have to defend it because there's a creature already here that, claims this land. But should he succeed, he gets that plot of land. That is now his lair. And if he wants, he can store any treasures there. He can have any companions he wants wait there. If he meets an NPC over the course of a game and he befriends them, he can say, look, I've got a lair. Go wait there for me. I'll come back to you and give you orders. And this reflects, the whole dragon nature. But for him, that might just be like he's got a nice house, or he's got sort of a treasury. Like he said, he's obviously got this treasure theme running for him. So it's no surprise that his character would have a lair that has these sorts of things, and he may have one before the start of the game, or he can claim one as the game's going on, and that is why it's a world trait. He can use it once per session, or he can collaborate with me, the GM, to decide what it is ahead of time, and that's how that sort of ties into the game. How are you going for interaction traits?
I want to grab these ones. To the Victor and Taunt.
All right, nice.
So we're building something a little, just some sort of, this is interactions, so they're not going to affect combat as much as the other features, but to the Victor gives you the ability to get more treasure. Obviously, we are going to take the spoils of war as we go, so it's just good. It's just a way of getting extra items. Like, the idea is not that we use all the items, we're just creating a kitty and a booty. And you might say, oh, well, you're going to have so much stuff, you're not going to use it all. Yeah, that's fine, though. I mean, we're here for a fantasy adventure. Not everything has to be finely tuned to help you in combat or help you with the story. You need to create the character you want to create. And then the situations will move and change, and you just keep acting in character. So it's more about, creating fun and interesting people rather than specifically trying to be the most optimal fighter or the best scout or, the best mage or whatever you're trying to do. So I feel like that's a good one. I don't mind if we have too much treasure stored away in our lair. Maybe we can be proud of that later. And Taunt is pretty cool. It's just something. Again, if we're trying to be a fighter and we want to basically bait everyone into attacking us because we're going to stack up on damage from some of our other abilities, I just thought that would be a cool way to get that. And the cool thing is if you've got anyone in the background that also deals a lot of damage, you can take some of the attention off them, let them get some abilities off. At least up front at the start of combat. So
yeah,
I just thought that was a good little combination.
Taunt might seem a little strange to some people because it sounds like a combat-oriented ability, but in reality it is interaction in that if you use it during a combat, it's a one use, so that takes up your turn. You're not able to hit on the same turn that you taunt, which means you're wasting a lot of potential damage, and Butlee has a very high potential damage character, and so it might be good to take the heat off his allies, but if he taunts, it specifically says everyone thinks you are the biggest threat. It doesn't mean everyone must attack you. Lesser creatures, cowardly creatures, might avoid you. Or worse, you might draw the attention of something bigger that was ignoring you up until that point. And it can really turn against you depending on what you're fighting. And that's why it falls into an interaction trait. Also, it's an interaction trait because the emphasis is you can use it to pull a distraction in like a busy room. If you wanted to steal something, say a painting, you could send an ally to go do that, and you taunt in the middle of this room, and suddenly the entire room's attention is looking at you, and your friend just steals a painting off the wall and legs it out the window. And it's things like that that allow it to be an interaction ability instead of a combat ability, and it's more interesting because of it. So I take it you're having a look through treasures?
Yes, I was just trying to understand duplicate as a
Yes.
treasure.
I wouldn't bother because your traits, unless you give it to someone else, I wouldn't bother with duplicate. It doesn't really suit your current character. The purpose of it is you can sometimes do really crazy things and amplify your damage if you've got a good action trait or something to that extent. But for you, I don't think it would apply.
No worries. I just didn't understand
fine.
it.
So Butlee has a couple of interesting options here that I'm just going to speak out loud. Specifically, the Serpent Katana is a two-handed melee weapon. It's only melee because it says attack for 6 damage at melee range. Otherwise, it's just a weapon. And then it can crit on a 17 plus and attack again, which if you can get lucky and crit and crit and crit and crit, you can do a massive amount of damage. But on the other hand, there's the toothpick down here, which is a nice cheap little item. It only does 3 damage and doesn't do a lot, but it lowers your crit threshold by 2, which means your crit normally goes on a 17, but if you lower your crit threshold by 2, it becomes a 15 and you suddenly crit on a 15. And that is much, much more likely to succeed. And so by taking lots of items that reduce your crit threshold, you can really amp up the likelihood of your special effects triggering, like Butlee's Rending Claws or Carnage. And so he could take that, and he could take some other items in the store that enhance this. He can take the Expert Grip. Oh, well, that works for the weapon. He could take the Quick Draw Gauntlet. He could put a Sharpening Stone on the toothpick to raise its damage up. However, the real problem is then he's just using a small one-handed weapon. And so if he's using a Sharpening Stone and toothpick, he would crit on a 15 for 5, 6, about 7 damage, I think it is. But otherwise, he'd just be attacking for 5 damage. And as you can see, you can buy a sword that does 5 damage. So it's really a choice between how much value am I going to get out of these crit effects versus what can I afford. Any thoughts so far, Butlee, or are you just having a look through? That potion of longevity, by the way, is 30 gold, but every other potion in the store is 10, or you can buy a random potion for 10, or a random spell for 10. We won't be dealing with extra companions, because this character is not meant to have extra companions in that sense. So
I think he's too much of a soloist.
Yeah, he does.
Doesn't want to share his loot with people.
Does seem like that kind of a guy.
I haven't got everything figured out, but I'm going to piecemeal some of this together as I go.
Sure, go crazy.
So we're going to do that. So I'm going to take the damage Serpent Katana. If you combine the Katana damage, which is 6 at melee range, it's actually, if you combine it with my 2 traits, it's 8 damage every attack. So that's cool. I believe with Potion of Immortality, because of my boosting stamina effects from Bulwark, I can double that. So
you can.
Rather huge in terms of stamina. At this point, you start thinking of, excuse me, like, obviously you can only hold so much stuff. So I have a 2-handed weapon. So all the one-handed and 2-handed weapons are done now. Can't touch those. I would like a chainmail. I usually create them, but I'm not hosted in this game.
Sorry. I'll promote you, and you can.
Yeah, so that's me promoted. Now it just means I can copy and paste things and cut them out of this without breaking them.
It means I trust him.
So that gives me 5 stamina, which should be doubled to 10 stamina, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking at someone with like 60 plus stamina at this point. When if I hadn't had those things, I would have been on 33. So I've
Yeah.
almost doubled what I'm at. I was going to go.
And that's why looking at your treasures is sometimes very important, because you can get those items which are very character defining and character changing.
So I have 140 spent plus 50, 190. So I have 60 more to go.
Yes.
I was really keen on taking a hip flask, but I don't think I'm going to use that because it'll take up all my things.
Well, it'll take up an action for a start.
Yeah, but I don't mind because it would give me heaps,
Yeah.
and with bolster, it'd be pretty huge.
So talking on these limits, Butlee briefly mentioned, you can only hold 8 items. So sometimes buying a really big item is fine, because you can't just buy lots of little items and hope for the best. It also means you've got a limit on how many healing items and things you can carry with you. And you do not recover HP until the session ends. So throughout the course of the session, you really need to make your HP work for you. And in Butlee's case, he's got so much of it that he can sort of take a generous amount of damage and not worry too much. But for a lot of people, sometimes you just roll low and you end up on 23 or so stamina, and you're sitting there with very little stamina, and you're in a sort of spot of trouble.
You make the choice then of if you want to take traits or abilities or items to buff that up. Like I've taken armor. You could totally ignore armor, or you could take other armor. There's other ones. There's shield caps and things as well, combined with your evasion or dodge or defensive actions. So there are other ways to defend if you haven't got huge stamina. But yeah, you need to be planning that as you're building. I'm gonna take a power grip to put that on my weapon, so it gives extra damage because it's a two-handed weapon.
Yep.
And then quick draw gauntlet. Patch mentioned when he was talking about crit threshold, so that you can only have the one enchantment, so it's an accessory, so it's sort of held on the side, and so that'll mean that all my crit damage will apply on 16 plus.
So,
and I believe that's all 250 gold as well.
That is all 250 gold. So that is Butlee's character. I think I just wanted to look at one last thing he had, and that was this iron sharpens iron. And all that is when you train with someone, and that doesn't have to be like a specific anything. You can just say, oh, our characters want to spar now, and do some rolls, and then you gain that trait until the end of session. That's just an interesting sort of, like,
keep in mind, like, that's how I was thinking of using that. So for example, if I want to hit crits, I generally would need to get an advantage on my rolls, because it's kind of hard to roll a 16 on 2 dice, like 16 plus on 2 dice. And so in my mind, like, I didn't sort of have, and because I'm a beast dragon and I have the warfare ability, I don't really have bolstering traits. They're more just general combat and general glorifying sort of things. And so I sort of forego any kind of bolstering or advantage gaining abilities. Whereas if I am playing in a game with other people who have those kind of abilities, that's the sort of thing I could learn from Iron Sharpens Iron. Like, if they have a pay some stamina or get a bolster, or when you're hit bolster, or sort of abilities and traits like that, that's the sort of thing I might be looking at getting. And of course, any critical hit damage or lowering of the crit threshold, or anything that lets me get more loot, would just be incredible as well. So there's quite a lot of, like, you can still use that trait to gain really cool stuff that coordinates with the stuff that you already have. So that's what I was thinking with that one.
Overall, Butlee has a very well-rounded character, because he does have a lot of stamina and a lot of damage. Then the problem is his crits won't be very reliable, and maybe he can fix that up in the future. When this character progresses, he can buy more items that sort of fill in the gaps and buff him up overall. And that's sort of how the balance of the game works, is you're not meant to get everything. Sometimes you do. Sometimes you just have that one character who ends up perfect, and you get all these amazing things.
Well, what's important to mention is like not everything I have is immediately helpful right up front.
Yeah.
And like out of say the 9 traits or the 2 attributes, they're not all like not everything is super great, super upfront, super fantastic. Things like lair and even greed is good. You know, they can take their time to really be useful. With treasure hunter or things like that to the victor, you know, they're going to take multiple plays and sessions of this character or multiple sort of like fights and things like that to really build up. And the point is that that's okay. I still end up with a really interesting character. I still have quite a lot of damage and contribute and can play along. I have some interesting abilities for sort of around and outside combat, so that as you know, general things resolve, meeting people or talking to people or you know, post battle spoils, like there's more extra stuff to do. So the point is that, yeah, you're not going to make a perfect character most of the time, but you can still make interesting things, interesting combinations. And the cool thing is that when you get stuff that's not immediately interesting, you can start to think, well, what do I need to do during the campaign to later like change my character and make them better? And so I like the progression of the character as you play along and things change and you get new items or extra traits or different things. So
Yeah.
the point is just you're not going to build someone perfect straight up front. The point of this character creation is to just create characters with interesting characters and personalities and, you know, thinking about what they can and can't contribute to the story as you go along.
One final thing we do need to do is treasure hunter. Typically, I do this at the start of a session, but if it's the first session, I do it in character creation, just so people know ahead of time, and they're not having to, you know, think over it in the middle of a game. But here you go, Butlee. You get a random treasure from your treasure hunter attribute. So you got the Helm of Insanity. That fits with you just fine. Once each combat, gain a free attack against all foes in melee range. The rest of it doesn't matter. It only applies to the savagery theme. There are items that tie into specific themes. But yeah, and so that's another treasure that has really made Butlee a lot scarier. And overall, I would think this character is quite powerful now, just because he can get a lot of damage in a single turn if he gets in a group of enemies. And with Taunt, he can easily do that and cheat his swiftness.
Yep. I can definitely run in and hold him off and fight. And the other thing with like the katana, it gives a second attack if you do well. So if you're using Helm of Insanity and creating a lot of attacks, you could probably create double up attacks as well, which is cool.
Yeah. So thank you for joining us. I hope this was a lot of fun for you guys. This character creation, this was a very middle of the road, but very solid character. Sometimes you get characters who are kind of not very good. They don't have a lot of things that go together. And sometimes you get characters who are crazy strong and you end up laughing the entire time because you're just thinking about, wow, this is going to be such a joke in combat.
You know what we should do to round off the character creation process?
Yeah?
Is give them a name.
Sure. What would you like to name your character?
Hercules.
Hercules. Okay.
It doesn't make any sense, but I think that'll do.
Yeah.
It's not quite as cliche as like Sauron. Sorry, that's terrible. All right. So if we ever talk about Hercules in the future, this is who we mean, whether it be in a game or we like. The other thing too is if we do go into game, we might change some of the names to fit the plot and things like that as well. But at least we can put a title of the video, creating Hercules. We give everyone the wrong impression. Anyway, yeah. So I just thought that'd be cool. And if we do it, I'd like to do more of these, maybe with me, maybe with other people, like if people are creating characters, and then hopefully one day that main aim is to turn a whole Tavern Tales game and get it in there. We've played a few, but it'd be good to record a few and hopefully share it with everyone. And if anyone likes what they're doing, they can let us know or give us feedback on what we can do better.
Yeah. So thank you, and please do come again in the future, watch our other content, and harass us to run a campaign and upload it to the internet. Thanks and goodbye.
Cheers.